encourage sustainable food choices, experimental evidence on the effects of climate impact information alone or in addition to other communication strategies. And she's a doctoral researcher at the Institute of Public Health and the Institute of Communication and Public Policy at the Università della Svizzera Italiana in Lugano, Switzerland, with the Swiss School of Public Health Fellow and currently conducting research on food sustainability and communication policy. Thank you. Please.
That's like the half of the presentation.
What's that?
It's a video.
Oh, okay.
But it's okay. Let's get started. Thank you so much, Bob, for the presentation, and thank you for the presentation of my colleagues. Now that I'm going last, I realize that we are together making a really cool collection of different methods, behavioral domains, and populations. So I hope you enjoy it. Yeah, that is there. Thank you so much. So basically, we've been talking about qualitative research, that is a really rich method, and then scenarios. So now we're coming to a completely different method, that is conducting experiments. So why bother in conducting experiments? Sacrificing sometimes the richness of other methods in order to test one thing at a time, right? So, okay, so this is the outline of my presentation. I'm going to talk about a problem, which is the environmental sustainability of food choices. So what a climate-friendly diet looks like, and why should we care? What is the solution that we put to test or that we experiment about? And it's communicating the climate impact of food, and what is the effect of communicating the climate impact of food, and basically, well, the research design and results. So why should we care, right? Why should we care about food? Do we have bigger problems when it comes to to climate change, right? So a third of greenhouse gas emissions come from the food sector, actually. So it is a big problem, and we should care. Actually, in climate action talks and in climate communication until recent years, it was like the elephant in the room. So we heard a lot of talk about fossil fuels, energy transition, but not so much about food systems. So, but it's important. Okay. So what is environmentally sustainable food consumption? And those of you, which I assume all of you work on behavior change and behavior change communication, you know that social problems are very complex, and then when you have to break down those problems into specific behaviors, that becomes like very complex. So the FAO definition of sustainable diets, which I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm just going to emphasize that those are diets with low environmental impact, and having to account food security not only for present generations but future generations. But breaking down or operationalizing what sustainable food consumption means involves realizing that there are many behaviors related to food consumption, not only diets, but also how what type of foods do you choose depending on how it's produced, and for example how you dispose food at the end, so food waste. This is what is sometimes called the farm to fork perspective of on food production and consumption. But basically, I know the screen is very small, so I just have an example. This is from a previous study. Oops. I just have examples of different behaviors across this spectrum. And I just wanted to show you this because when we talk about food sustainability, we're talking about very many different behaviors. So how do we prioritize what is worth working on? So health and environmental impacts of foods, are they all equal? Well, of course, they're not. So when it comes to sustainability of food, a very key word is supply chain. So how the food is produced, and how it's transported, how it's processed, and finally how it's wasted or not wasted. So, but here I just want you to have a look to the having a look at not only the sizes of the different foods, this is the greenhouse gas emissions per kilogram of each of those foods. So we can see, of course, there are differences between foods like beef or coffee or olive oil, and those are huge differences. You can see the size. But I also would like you to have a look at the size of the colorful bars, and how in some cases when we are told, like for example, eating local or eating seasonal food is very sustainable, that it is true, but the impact of transport or distribution compared to other parts of the supply chain, which is the red color in this case, is really tiny, if you see. It's almost negligible compared to the impact of simply producing different types of food. So the type of foods really matter for sustainability. Eating local is great, of course, for many other reasons, but if we have a climate change perspective, then it becomes a little bit less important. Okay. This is a zoom out, so you can see the whole range of foods, from beef to nuts, and the different climate impacts in greenhouse gas emissions, just to have a broader perspective on the same. This is very stubborn. Okay, when it comes to health impacts, we see synergies also with health impacts. So we see that, for example, if you compare the health and environmental impacts of different foods, there is a good synergy to reduce red meat consumption and processed meat consumption in some populations, of course, where this is very high. So we know actually that in order to keep climate change within safe limits, we globally, not only each of us, but globally, as the human beings, we need to reduce meat consumption by half. That's quite a lot. It doesn't mean that we need to become vegetarians. I'm not vegetarian, by the way. I like the taste of meat. It's very tasty, but it's very hard to eat. But it is an important topic also for sustainability. So, what is experimental evidence on reducing meat demand in general? And I'm very intentional when I use the word demand here. So basically, if you look at the research on different experiments, randomized experiments that test different interventions to see what is the effectiveness of those communication interventions on reducing meat demand, you will see that communicating the multiple consequences of meat consumption doesn't have a great impact. So what I just did, showing both health, environmental impact, that doesn't work very well. And unlike other behavioral domains, communicating the environmental impact information does have an impact. And this is quite interesting because there are some other issues, like for example the violence that are so embedded in social norms, well also food, but they're so related to social norms that maybe communicating only information is not enough. So that's why I'm bringing here a very old question in communication science and in behavior change communication, and is, can we just rely on information, and how can we improve the effect of information? How can we outperform the effect of information without actually having a backfire effect? But yeah, basically, we do need more research on this. So this is like the key points of my literature research on red consumption and reducing red meat consumption. And is that information on environmental impacts of food is effective. That there are consistent results in virtual and real life context, which is very promising for those of us conducting online research, and that more evidence on red meat reduction is needed, because most of the studies that are out there, they study meat consumption in general, and not all meats are made equal if you see from a climate change perspective. So, what is the target population of this research? This is a purely academic research project. We are talking about Switzerland and why we chose this population. Well, weekly meat consumption in Switzerland is 70, this number of grams here, so I'm just going to show you. And the Swiss official dietary advice is actually 240 grams. So just to show you how really average meat consumption in the population exceeds healthy dietary guidelines and also planetary health dietary guidelines by quite a lot. These high levels of meat consumption are particularly high in men, the Italian language region, where I conducted this research, and the youngest age, which is the population that this research is conducted on. We can do it. Okay. Okay, what interventions can outperform or hinder the effect of climate impact information on red meat consumption? So that's the question we started with. And I would like to have a word on experiments, since we've been promoting here some methods too. So I come here with experiments. So why should we do experiments? Sometimes when I've seen the presentations here at this fantastic event, I've seen many campaigns, like multi-component campaigns, 360 campaigns with lots of different interventions, very cool things that have been done. So why should you do experiments that help you just test one thing at a time? And the thing is, when you do interventions, you do lots of activities normally. You do soap operas, and you do nudging, you do marketing, you do theater. There are many different interventions. And then you do all that, and you hope you will have some results. But you don't really know how that happens. So what exactly had an impact? So that's what experiments are for. You sacrifice a bit of the richness of having a multi-component intervention in order to have accurate results about effect. So that's what experiments are for. So the research at hand is a randomized online survey experiment. I'm gonna show you exactly what it does. The participants are students from Swiss universities who eat meat and don't follow a medically prescribed diet. And there were 3 experimental conditions, so we tested different messages. So you might be familiar also with that type of method, testing different things and seeing what works best. And the experimental conditions we tested was having information alone versus emotional appeals or versus skill building. The outcomes that we measured, or the behavior, well, in this case it's not behavior, it's willingness, it's more an attitude, willingness to reduce meat consumption and willingness to reduce beef consumption. This is what we measure as an outcome. Okay. And I'm just going to skip through this, go very quickly through this. But this is just to say that, of course, the type of interventions you measure must have a behavioral framework behind. This is just one of many behavioral frameworks that we know. And I just want to say that we do know that food choices depend also on food environments and physical constraints and what drivers surround people. What drivers are surrounding people's choices. But here we're gonna talk only about, let's say, one part of the possible behavioral drivers that can impact food choices. Okay. So what we did was basically, this is the first of a series of experiments. I'm only going to present experiment 1. The first group received factual information. So we conducted a survey and we randomized participants into 3 different groups. The first group received factual information on the different climate impacts of food. The second one received the same information plus an emotional appeal video. And the third group received factual information plus skill building video. And by skill building, I mean how to reduce red meat. how to reduce meat, sorry. Okay, so this is the type of information they receive. This is very tiny, I'm gonna show you just bigger. And what this allows is that you have a variable that goes constant, which is showing information. And then you add something else. And this helps you to understand if the results of those groups, of course, are attributable to that specific message that you expose them to. So this was the default information intervention. Again, information about the climate impact of different foods. They also received an emotional appeal video from, maybe you have seen this online, it's one video from Fridays for Future. And I'm not going to play it because I will take away 1 whole minute. But it's a video that calls you to stop thinking that nothing is happening. And it's just a family that is, their house is burning, and yet they act as if nothing is happening. So it's quite shocking when you see it. And yeah, this is basically the start of the video. I'm not gonna play. This is just a regular family having a regular day while their house is burning. The other group had the same information plus a video on just sneaky ways or some tips on how to eat less meat. This is what they got. Okay, something like that. So the sample characteristics, I'm just not going to read on that, but it was a convenient sample of students. 60% of them were female, and those are the distribution of each of the groups. Which, for those of you who are familiar with experiment, is like the very minimum that you would expect on a sample for an experiment to have some measurable effect. And basically, these are the results. So I don't know how friendly is this graph for many of you, but I'm going to wrap it up right now. I just wanted to show you that these are the results for information only on willingness to reduce meat and willingness to reduce beef. The intervention of info plus emotional appeal, again, meat and beef, and info plus skills. So what we found is that the only really statistically significant results come from the comparison between information only and information plus emotion. And basically what we found is that the emotional appeal backfired. So information alone was actually more effective in order to increase the willingness to reduce meat consumption. So I think I'm going to leave it almost there. I have just a few conclusions. First, that we do see different outcome results in the meat versus beef. So this showed that there was some understanding, of course, of the different environmental impacts of different meats. There was a significant boomerang effect of the emotional appeal. We have some hypotheses of why this might happen. We can talk about that later probably. The skill building intervention had no significant effect. It didn't change much the impact on the willingness to reduce meat and beef consumption. And just to say a word that emotional appeals should be used with caution. I mean, we know emotions are a big part of behavior change communication, but should be used with caution. Thank you so much. I'm not going to talk about the limitations, but I'm sure some of your questions might be related to the limitation of this type of method, but also the advantages. Thank you so much. Thank you.